Welcome to the Power of Music podcast, brought to you by JM International. Get ready to explore conversations with those making a difference through music.
Hello, and welcome everyone to the Power of Music podcast, provided to you by JMI, Jeunesse Musicale International, a global network of NGOs that empowers young people through music across all boundaries. Today, we are recording from Harare, Zimbabwe, where the JMI Global Conference is hosted. My name is Ricardo, and I'll be your host. And for this episode, I'm joined by Namakau Star. Namakau Star is an alternative R&B and hip-hop musician from South Africa who supports the quest for self-improvement through her music. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you please share a little bit about your journey into music?
Awesome. So my journey into music is a culmination of lived experiences as well as just a genuine interest in music and the voice overall. I didn't grow up in a musical family as per se, but as people do, I grew up in a family where people consumed music. So my mom was a lover of a plethora of genres. She loved gospel, she loved folk music, she loved traditional Zambian music, whereas my father was very much he loved classic Black pop culture. So your Whitney Houstons and Aretha Franklins and Erykah Badu's, and just general hip hop is what my dad was very much into. So I found myself enjoying all kinds of music growing up. But I was drawn to singing, I think, when I was about 9 years old. I learned that, hey, I have a voice, and no one knew that I had a voice before, no one knew I had a voice, but I knew I had a voice. And I just remember my classic pop culture, I'm a singer moment was watching Sister Act. And there was a scene where Lauryn Hill was singing. And I think that was the moment where I knew I was a singer. And that is how I ended up in a religious institution wanting to join the choir because I wanted to learn more about this thing that I could do. And that is my main journey into music. Now, fast forward into my late 20s, I actually, let's backtrack to my early 20s. I picked up music as a hobby. I picked up music because I was drawn to it, Even my adolescent time, I was one of the only women in my school who would go and rap and do battle rap. And my friends always used to encourage me and say, hey, you're really good at this, And I also found myself curating our serenade group. And that was all by ear. I never had formal training, but I had teachers and mentors who believed in me. And that pushed me to keep creating. And I think anyone who is in this music journey, there's this insatiable burn or itch that you have to kind of scratch that pushes you to create all the time or explore it. So whether it starts as you being an a cappella person, recording voice notes, and then you evolve into attracting producers who are like, hey, you have a talent or you have a voice, then it keeps expanding and you it's like a snowball effect. You kind of just can't escape it, especially if you choose it and it keeps choosing you back.
How important is it, you think, to have role models and mentors that keep believing in you and keep pushing you?
I think it's absolutely important, especially because as much as we grow up in homes where our parents consume music, they don't understand the value of music. They don't see it as something that is a skill or vocation or something that you can pick up and do and survive off of. So those misconceptions can kind of kill the light in a person or, douse out the fire. And what I found is that, especially in my formative years, is that my teachers were the reason why I believed in myself. From the time I was like 6 years old in nursery school, kindergarten, I had a teacher who would push me forward, and she saw something in me and all of my other classmates as well. And I remember in primary school, something that was very affirming is that I was auditioned. I knew I wasn't going to get the solo because they're like, okay, only people from grade 5 can do solos. But I auditioned for the solo anyway. And my choir teacher saw something in me and she's like, okay, next year, you're definitely going to have a solo, and she kept pushing me. And fast forward to high school, same thing, same energy. I had teachers who would push me to the front, they wouldn't let me be in the background and they would make time for me as well. I think that's the beautiful thing about mentorship is that constant affirmation that you get from someone who you look up to, someone who sees you beyond, the perceptions of what musicians are in mainstream pop culture, and just a word of encouragement on how to keep showing up. And I think that's what mentors did for me up until maybe when I was in varsity, when I started doing music completely by myself and I had no mentors. I just had a community more than anything, or I infiltrated communities where like-minded people were doing music and somehow it becomes peer-to-peer mentorship.
And for the listeners that have not yet listened to your music, can you describe it a bit?
Yes. So I am an alternative R&B, hip-hop, and pop artist. I say all these genres because these are the genres that I've actually explored, wholeheartedly. The subject matter that I explore in my music really has to do with the reflection of the self, as well as the human spirit, and the idea of the future self, or the big sister kind of talking back at you and, giving you a POV of a person who is completely human, who is not a spectacle, but also going through this human experience with everyone who listens to the music. I love playing with world building and sound design. If you ever listen to my music, I hope that you experience a bit of an immersive experience with it as well, from going out of space to kind of just gliding on clouds. And then when I say pop music, I recently had the chance to go to Berlin and work with a pop band called the Planetoids, and that's their style. And obviously I have my voice, and we basically collaborated in a way to kind of give room to how I write and perceive the world and how they understand, music sonically. And they're very skilled. They've studied music. So that background mixed with my kind of free form background kind of made in the middle. And that's how I got into the pop genre of music.
To pick up on something you said a little bit earlier about mainly your parents being used to consume music. We talked a little bit before the podcast about how important it is that on a kind of global scale, but especially probably here, we have a sort of mindset change where we see music as a vocation more and see the more of the power of music from a different perspective. Can you say a few words about that, and maybe also what artists or what you can do to kind of spark that change?
Yeah, so because, you grow up in a world where people maybe appreciate music for its entertainment value, they forget how it transcends and how healing it can be, and how it is a tool, a weapon, a means of, it's also very political. So I think with hindsight, I wish my parents, understood music as a whole, outside of it just being consumed. And with that being said, obviously the little ways and the big ways, they did support music. And, I have to pay respect to that is buying CDs. And at home, we had a big library of CDs, different catalogs of different people, as well as cassettes and vinyls, So that's something I can appreciate and respect about my parents and just my family in general. Even my grandfather, who he makes music, he made a CD and he published it. So that having that physical, support is so important. But I think more than anything, I think we need to re-educate people especially in the homes of budding musicians or basically people who are interested in music as a career or even as a hobby that can transform into career, is how to firstly cultivate it by not diminishing the purpose of what and the role that music plays in society, as well as supporting mentorship and supporting it in a way that kind of highlights its importance, and using tools such as the internet, investing in instruments. You'll find that in homes people will buy PlayStations, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, gaming is also cool, don't get me wrong, but imagine if that time was used to cultivate a skill like, picking up an instrument or learning music software. And that's what I think we need to re-educate our society about, because a lot of self-taught people can't gauge whether they're ready to take it further and not just it be a hobby, because there's nothing to kind of bounce off of. There's no practice, there's no discipline, so it's always treated as an easy way out if you become famous, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's a skill, it's a discipline, it's a practice that, is good for society, and it's good for the fabric of humanity if it's used correctly. So yeah, that's one way. And then I always encourage people who have friends of musicians to support the music, to buy the music if they can. Obviously we live in an era where streaming is huge, and the little things like pre-saving and pre-adding are just a way to say, hey, like, I see you, I see your skill, it is valuable. And provided that you do see the skill and you do appreciate that artist, like, that is how I feel like we need to be looking at support, like buying tickets to shows, coming out to experience, your budding artists, and contributing to the merch. And if you can't afford it, like, even a contribution, it makes a difference. So that's definitely how I would say we need to be re-educating and talking to people about what the value of supporting an artist looks like, and from the formative to the stages where a person is actually navigating a music journey in the world.
And do you see that this awareness is also growing among fellow artists and the industry at large?
Yes, this awareness is growing, but at the same time, when you're in the music bubble, it feels like you're just competing in this wide of, people putting music out. So that's why I think it's very important that it starts from an immediate place. Yes, there is general awareness amongst musicians, and you'll even find as a musician that most of your mutuals and the people that support you are musicians too. They appreciate it because they're in it. And I think once we get to a place where we cross over the bubble, and start educating the general public and the teachers and just the general public, then I think you will be able to start seeing a difference more than anything.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, but I think if artists realize that they're all in this together, and they start to like spread this message, and the one you just explained so beautifully, we can really change something on a larger scale. But yeah, it has to start exactly in those formative years with young people learning instruments, learning the value of music. Because, yeah, a PlayStation is nice, but it's not a very spiritual experience. And music can be a very transcending spiritual experience.
True.
Not only to experience, but especially also to create, especially also to create together.
Yeah.
Here at the GMI Global, I know there's going to be a panel about gender inclusion. Can you tell me something about how that is here for you and what you've experienced?
So, firstly, this is my first GMI Global, and I am very grateful to see, the work that's being done in the broader music world, from Africa to the world. I think for me, I do believe that, not to paint myself to be the underdog, but I do believe that I represent the underrepresented. And I think that's what this conversation is about. You look at the statistics versus, being in a place that's inclusive. Sometimes you start to forget that, there's a reality of how much change there needs to be and how much work still needs to be done. So it's very easy to slip into that comfort zone of, yes, we empower women, look. And it kind of becomes just kind of like this token conversation. And I think what I would love to urge anyone listening to this podcast or even attending, conferences is to see gender equality and inclusion outside of the panels and, the topics, and start to live by it. And that means if you are a curator, if you are a booking agent, if you are a talent scout, if you are a producer, the way for you to be an ally is to be able to see the discrepancies and act upon them in your own way to open the doors and create more space. Because sometimes people have this default of, I did it for 2 women or I did it for 2 queer people, and therefore I've played my part. And it unfortunately doesn't end there. We're undoing hundreds of years of damage. So, yes, play your role, and we're grateful for everyone that plays their role, and we're grateful for everyone who, is okay to talk about it. And sometimes some people get defensive and we ruffle some feathers. But, I think once we move through that discomfort and realize that it actually has to become a mindset and a way of life to open doors for people who haven't had the same opportunities as men, more specifically, then I think that's when allyship becomes more sustainable. So yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And what I always find difficult, I've interviewed some people from the Play It Loud project from JMI, which is really targeted at gender inclusivity and gender equality within the music industry. And they do these beautiful projects that you have to sign up for. And then how do you not end up preaching to the choir, where the people that show up, they are, more or less already an ally? And that I think is a really, really big problem. They did a really nice workshop at a European youth event somewhere in Strasbourg. And 95% of the people that showed up were women. How can you do that? Like, I like, actually, you said sometimes you have to ruffle some feathers because you have to do that, because you have to reach the people that need to be reached. But how do you do that?
I think it is hard knowing how there is a lack of representation, and the practicalities of that can be super difficult. But I think when you have a set intention and I wouldn't say a rigid, but a very steadfast approach to what inclusivity and what making sure the turnout is 95% women or queer people, it's rooted in intention. I think it's rooted in a mission. And I think that's important. I know, and I too am part of an organization that is women-led, and we do make calls, but making calls is for everyone, but we make sure that the preferences still meet our intentions as an organization. So whoever makes it, and everyone is considered, but you're more likely to if you are representing queer women, Black women, and that's the thing. It's you have to have an intention that doesn't exclude anyone, but gives people preference to have that space, because normally they wouldn't. Normally, if you looked at a festival lineup, and we talk about it all the time, we know the difference between representation and tokenism. And that's a challenge. So having that intentionality is very important. That's the only way I think it can translate into the faces that we see on lineups, as well as the panels that we have and conversations we have regarding and surrounding gender equality and inclusion. It's also giving the right people the microphone and the right teams, to do, the people who actually experience it. It's like a man can't, fix. So you need the people who understand the experience to be the people that book the people or do the open calls or set the intention for the festivals or the workshops. And that's the only way to do it. And I think through movements are important. That's why movements and communities are so important, because a movement has a vision and intention and goals and KPIs that they have to kind of abide by, that guide how they navigate getting the right people and getting to the right people.
And if you could pick one, let's say one issue, one problem within the music industry right now, maybe specifically here, and you could fix one thing regarding this issue, what would it be?
That's a very difficult one. One problem I would fix in the music industry. Does it strictly have to be in the music industry?
No.
I would definitely fix the relationship between the powers that be, government institutions, and the music industry. I think, even just sitting at the conference over the last 2 days, that's been such a standout problem. It's such a gate. It's such a challenge to not exist in a bubble as a music ecosystem in a world that is very bureaucratic, institutionalized. And I'm not saying that music should become institutionalized. I just feel like music needs to become more sustainable, but we need more support. We need, we in South Africa, we had one of our ministers speak at a career world forum and say something so damaging about the arts. She said that, we need to focus on maths and science because, nobody really, sorry to you guys over there by the art sector. And then when you actually find out like what music and culture does for our GDP, it's absolutely like you're failing so many people. You're failing so many geniuses. You're failing so many community leaders, builders, and future, change makers through just like disregarding, a whole entire industry basically. And it's hard to make it an industry if we don't exist in the broader ecosystem where it becomes more sustainable in our countries. So yeah, I think that's the main thing. Like, that's the biggest problem for me. It's how, even from a top level, it filters down from the top, the way we experience this music industry more than anything. The disregard and that feeling that we often feel as musicians as we don't matter, or you need to be a struggling artist to have a great career, or fame is the only way, is that that's what we constantly fed and taught, and we feel so inadequate because it's a ripple effect of how we are seen in this world.
Yeah, wow. And with all due respect to all mathematicians out there listening, if you come home from a very, very rough day, I don't open my math book to do some math problems. I just want to listen to some music and, either smile, dance, or cry, whatever is needed that day.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's hard.
it's very heartbreaking. But with that being said, I mean, on a more lighter note, we do have people, rallying and fighting the good fight with us, and it's so interesting because the Minister of Sports and Arts and Culture clapped back to be like, please retract your statements. These are the implications of saying something like this.
Oh, that's good.
You know what I mean? And just seeing it on that level is like, yes, okay, cool. Like, there's still the people who understand the value, and especially in a lot of underserved communities, places that are crime ridden, places that are, plagued with teenage pregnancy. And because of that helplessness, that's where, you can plug in arts, culture, craftsmanship, sports, to fix things, to literally alleviate, rather, to give people a place, to give people, young people more specifically, a discipline, a space of practice, and a space of community that actually changes their lives for the better. And we'll throw education in there, which is also something that needs to be implemented in a lot of these academy programs that we see, across Africa. But most importantly, I think having the space is the first things first, and that's where I see the value.
Yeah, and it's good to hear that at least some government officials kind of pushed back on that, and then you hope that by doing that, it actually sparks debate among the people, where people say, "Hey, this was sad," and I mean, let's hope for the best. And to talk about like hope and more lighter note, what are you looking forward for yourself in your career? Like, is there music coming? Like, what are your plans for the coming time?
Yeah, so I am on a mission to get rally up support for my upcoming EP called Life on Pluto, which is going to be out on the 20th of October. It's a follow-up project to my EP Landing, and it is very much in the world of expressing displacement and belonging, as well as love, in a world where I consistently have felt that I don't belong. Being of Zambian descent, growing up in South Africa, experiencing xenophobia, experiencing not necessarily exploring mainstream genres, and just, my awkward sense of self mixed with the confidence I have as a musician. So I'm very excited for that project. I'm very excited to experience how it's received. Also doing a couple of shows in the coming months, and this month, from month end, I'll be pretty busy. And I'm also very happy to be speaking at XP Music Futures around, the same conversation, and a very important one at that, gender inclusion. And yeah, so I'm very excited. I hope that anyone listening to this understands and feels connected to this voice and to this cause, and that they could participate and join my community and, celebrate music with me.
So on that note, where can they find you?
You can find me everywhere where music is. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. I have so many surprises on YouTube. I have some short films going on in there. You can find me on Facebook. You can also find me professionally on LinkedIn. So I do a lot of A&R work for a distribution label, and I also consult artists on release strategy. So that's also just my role in, from being an artist who was not equipped to release music and failing 1,000 times to start understanding the value of how you put your music out to the world. So I offer that as something, for fun. It's cool to have creative ideas with other artists. And then, I have music coming out. So you can find me pretty much everywhere. Yeah.
That's easy enough then.
And Spotify and Apple Music.
As always, the
Yes.
last question. What is the power of music?
The power of music is spiritual. I think music is a very spiritual thing. In the wise words of Fela Kuti, you don't play with music. And that is it. It's a place where people commune. It's a place where people escape their problems. It's a place for people to document the life and times as we know it today. It's a tradition. It's popular culture. It shapes the minds of people in the best and the worst ways. So the power of music is connectivity and humanity. And that's where we all meet each other and put our biases aside. Like the music transcends the physical and it hits the spiritual. That's the power.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. If you want more information about JM or you would like to get involved, visit www.jmi.net. At JMI, we are on a mission to make the world more musical. That's why we created Mubazar, a digital platform that helps us manage all our musical activities across 80 countries worldwide, connecting musicians with opportunities to grow both personally and professionally. If you are a music professional looking for a better way to manage and promote your music activities, check out Mubazar. Created for music organizers, by music organizers, Mubazar allows you to run music competitions, workshops, camps, auditions, masterclasses, awards, events, and much more. Mubazar offers custom application forms, payments for your activities, jury tools, translations, analytics, and more. Mubazar is fast becoming the best place for musicians to find and apply for music opportunities online, and you can sign up today for a free organizer account by going to www.mubazar.com, registering, and then requesting to upgrade to an organizer on the right-hand menu. For more info, don't hesitate to get in touch via support@mubazar.com. It would mean a lot to us if you could give us 1 minute of your time and rate and review the podcast. In case you have any suggestions or would like to be one of our next guests, feel free to reach out to us through the JMI socials.